architecture from the traditional lands of the Eastern Kulin Nation, right here in the ancient Karim Karim swamp. Please join us in the conversation. Text us on 0493 213 831. We'd love to have you with us. My guest this evening is the Mayor of Glen Eira City Council, Councillor Dr. Simone Zmood, who was elected Mayor of Glen Eira in 2024 to 2025 council year, and again just yesterday for the next 2025 to 2026 council year, and is the inaugural councillor for Orrong Ward. Simone was first elected to Glen Eira City Council at the 2020 local government election for Camden Ward and held the role of Deputy Mayor in 2023 to 2024. Councillor Zmood grew up in Glen Eira. She has made her home just down the road from where her great-grandparents lived and has happily raised a family of 4 children with her husband. Since first elected as councillor, 2 of her children have finished school and 2 have moved out of the family home. Simone is a management consultant and high-level strategist consulting to multinationals, ASX 200 companies, government-owned corporations, startups and non-for-profit. She is experienced in strategic planning and project management with more than 20 industries. And she has years of governance, strategy and financial experience on boards and volunteering and community groups focusing on education, social justice and the environment. This includes multiple roles as treasurer and chair of charitable trusts and chair of a finance, audit and risk committee. We should add to that one as well that your PhD just got conferred as well. Welcome to the program, Mayor Simone.
Thank you, Ilana. It's great to be here. Thank you for the invitation, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Such a pleasure also to extend the conversation towards the city of Glen Eira. We've had in some of the earlier years of the program a bit more of a focus on Kingston as the immediate local area that we're broadcasting from, and Radio Karim is so passionate about local people, local stories. But Glen Eira is just our neighbours right there, and also where Studio Razbash's offices are based.
And look, I'm biased completely. We think Glen Eira is the greatest, but the reality is it's just South Road. Kingston and Glen Eira are neighbours. In fact, when I grew up, it was the city of Moorabbin, and the city of Glen Eira was created out of the city of Caulfield and part of the city of Moorabbin. So the city of Moorabbin was split 3 ways, and Kingston got a significant proportion of it, and Glen Eira got a part of it as well. So it is terrific to be here in Kingston. Great councillors. I've met, past mayors and deputy mayors, and congratulations, obviously, to the recently elected mayor and deputy mayor in Kingston as well.
And you work very closely with all the local mayors, and I know so many local mayors are actually women as well, which is pretty amazing for the girl gang.
I haven't actually heard. So there are 79 councils in Victoria. And when I reached out to the president, Jennifer Anderson, of the Municipal Association of Victoria, we just refer to it as MAV, I asked in the last term of council, she did a quick count and it looked like there were 33 of the 79 councillors were women. So not quite half, but a substantial proportion. And I actually had a really lovely, a few weeks ago, a catch up with a group of 6 women mayors, where we just sort of got together and celebrated the end of the year of being a mayor and sharing some fun stories and talking about our plans. I've just come back from a week of leave. Someone else has just left yesterday. It's a very intense role being a mayor, especially if you throw yourself into it. So it's really good to have other people to share your journeys with and be able to get advice. How do you cope with different things? How do you manage that self-care so you do get sleep? Because it sometimes feels like it's 24/7.
What's your biggest tip for managing a high-pressure, high-stress role?
Look, I think, and I would say I would give myself probably a D or an F in it, but it really is that putting boundaries and making that time and making sure that you're still seeing your family and your friends. And I will be a much better role model for other people in making sure that I do get that daily exercise, get enough sleep, all those things that we talk about when we're talking to people about healthy and lifestyle, making sure that I actually do it myself.
Did part of that well-being play into your research in your PhD is all about leadership success?
So, it is interesting because I was finishing off my PhD at the same time as being mayor. So I'd come home at 10 or 11 at night and then sit and work on my PhD until early morning. So for the first half of my previous mayoral term, I was quite sleep deprived. And so trying to fit in those other things like eating properly, exercise, it became a real juggle because I had a constrained amount of hours. I'm particularly excited about this year that I think I'm going to have a much better balance and be able to enjoy that. I mean, it was amazing the last year. I learnt so much, and I think that experience from 1 year of being a mayor will make me an even better mayor and better leader for our community.
What's the biggest lesson you've had to learn as mayor?
It's all about the people. And sometimes that's really easy. Sometimes things are just simple. Sometimes things are just celebrations. But sometimes things are hard. And so if you care about your community and you care about the people and you want to listen, you just sometimes can't keep everyone happy. I was at a meeting with a group of traders, and one trader wanted the street to be lit up like it was daytime all through the night. And literally another trader was saying, but I live on a side street and I want it to be dark at night. So I had two people saying they wanted exactly the opposite thing. So when you're thinking about that urban planning, and that's not even taking into account the impact beyond people on whether there's impacts on plants, animals, insects,
light pollution,
Sometimes
safety.
you can't keep everyone happy.
Yeah, absolutely. But is that where the ability to fall back on expert knowledge, on expert advisors, on the research in terms of our public space and the strong urban planning team that no doubt drives decisions?
Absolutely. And so when you're looking at a decision, and we're always doing community engagement, hearing from community, because we want to make sure that we haven't missed anything, that the officers in their research and pulling together their report haven't missed anything. But we'll look at the different criteria that are helping inform your decision, and different people might weight those in different ways. So they might put more on safety, or they might put more on the way it makes people feel. And so they're the challenges. But I think if you're really systematic about it, if you've got good governance principles in place, if you've got a group of people who are coming together to focus on the community, and so they're focusing on working well so that their focus is not distracted from that external decisions that we need to make for the community, then you actually get a really good process for making decisions that sometimes are hard.
Do you have a post-occupancy analysis policy and framework that's part of the governance structure at Glen or something maybe you're considering bringing in? Just remember back to many years of working on public facilities and council buildings as we're sitting in tonight, and there was never a formal post-occupancy evaluation done at the end. It wasn't part of the fee, it wasn't part of the brief, it wasn't part of the project.
So are you talking about if we're renting or making spaces available for other organisations or for our own activities?
If you're creating a new building, building a new facility, changing the lights on the street.
So I'm going to use that line. Funny you should ask that. One of the things that I really asked for, and obviously other councillors supported that, in the previous term of council, was for us to take a very strategic approach to our properties and to have a really clear understanding of our community needs. And so that this analysis has been going on and proceeded to this year. We endorsed a strategic property plan, which actually sets out the principles for looking at every single property that we have, and identifies whether they're being used at their best value for the community, and the analysis is being done now about specific properties. So I think not so much post-occupancy, but thinking about not just now but into the future. And parallel to that is a really deep, developing a deep understanding of our community's needs now and going into the future, so that we're looking at all those properties and making sure that we have what the community needs now, but we also make sure that we have what we anticipate the needs are going to be. So it's actually probably more nuanced than looking at one building at a time, but looking about what are the needs across the entire municipality.
Yes.
And making sure we have the right things in the right places. And if we don't, if there are gaps, what are we going to do to fill those gaps?
Will it also capture stakeholder data? And the things that's in the back of my mind as I ask that question is the experience of the immediate local community here with the level crossing removal. And the whole community rallied against what they called Skyrail. And in some areas, the LXRA listened and they were able to put it down in a trench. But then once it was built, the community realised they'd made a mistake. And they actually would have preferred the outcome to elevate it and create an amazing public space underneath. And I just wonder if that change, where the councils are looking at bringing in a mechanism to capture that change in community and capture that change in thinking.
So community engagement is actually legislated as part of really the DNA of the way Glen Eira operates, and actually it's an expectation for all councils. And I will come to the LXRA because I've got some stories there. In the previous term of council, community engagement was one of the pillars of our strategic plan. So the previous councillor determined it was something that we needed to improve on at Glen Eira, and so it became a focus in our strategy. It's now not because it's actually embedded in the way we do things now. So what we felt was there needed to be some sort of central consulting part within Glen Eira that made sure that we were consistent in the way that we presented information to people, consistent in the way that we asked questions, and consistent in the way that we analysed it, so that any community member could pick up a community engagement report and be able to say, I know this section is where I'll find out how many people sent in emails, how many people sent in survey. And then the last step of that process was, how do we close that loop? So how do we let the community know the feedback they've provided, how it's been used? So they might tell us A, B and C, and A, yes, we've made this change. B, actually we think we've already addressed it. C, unfortunately we've not been able to for these reasons. And I think that closing the loop is so incredibly important, because otherwise people say, you're constantly doing surveys. Yeah. Why do we bother telling you anything? So people need to know the information they've given us completely has made a difference. Now, Glen Eira has the least amount of open space in all of Victoria. And over the last 5 years, we've spent $30 million buying land to fill in some of those open space gaps. We've also had, I think it was 9 level crossing removals. So we've had a mixture of trench and above ground. And the Gerring Trail, which goes along the Frankston line, is Skyrail. And I know at the time there was, and it was before I was a councillor, a lot of community concern. Council sees we are the level of government close to the community, so we are really careful about the way that we do community engagement. And the challenge for people was things were happening in our municipality, but it was a different level of government doing it. And we were not in control, and we might have done things differently. I wasn't, as I said, on council at the time, so I really I heard people's stories, but I do know that under that Skyrail now along the Frankston line and Cranbourne Pakenham line, there's a linear park. So people can go bike riding. There's sections where there's play equipment. There's a basketball hoop. Beautiful,
excellent public space outcomes and car parking. And, sometimes it really pings me because I get to these amazing stations that have had a beautiful outcome. And unfortunately, the public went no Skyrail because they don't trust the government. The population doesn't actually trust the state government or even at times local government to deliver a good outcome, which was sad, but the result was excellent in so many areas. And then I think we could have had the same in the same great spots. Like we started off the conversation really excited about some of these moments and details of council life and council policy, and we will absolutely get back to it. But there is one question that I do love to ask all my guests, and you have listened to the program a little bit, you're our listener, so I think you know which one is coming. And that's, what's your earliest memory of a building or place?
So my earliest memory would be as a child. I remember, and I'll talk about what was inside. My brother was 2 years younger than me, and we were living in Queensland, and there was a huge electrical storm, and I remember he was in a little bassinet with the mosquito netting over it, and I remember going, because he was crying in the storm, and then running to get my mum, so I might have been 18 months, 2 years old. And then I remember the next day coming outside, and it was an area that was still being developed, so it was basically empty blocks of lands, and it was just sort of like an old walk up. They don't build them like that anymore, 2-story apartments. We were in the ground floor apartment, and I remember walking with my grandmother across one of the empty blocks, and a huge frilled neck lizard opened.
Wow.
It's so really strong visual memories. And I think the kind of the simplicity of that building style, where everything there wasn't a lot of there was obviously not electronics, but everything could just be fixed by the person living there. You didn't need to call in an expert. The systems weren't that complex then, and certainly things were repairable.
That's definitely a really important characteristics of sustainability as well, to be able to repair it and maintain it and care for the asset, care for the building, the property.
Yes, and it's really something that Glen Eira has woven into the policies around how we will build things going forward, and also how we pull apart things. So there's targets to recycle if we're deconstructing a building, to recycle as much as possible and minimise what gets sent to landfill. So 3 blocks of land that we bought just over South Road in Bentley, that was really clear, and we achieved really good outcomes in terms of making sure that as we were clearing the houses so that we'd create a new park, we were making sure that as many materials as possible were diverted away from landfill.
That would have actually been I can imagine it's a bit confronting for residents to think, oh, we're losing housing during a housing crisis. But nature is so important, and green space and green trees are so important.
And that's what urban planning's about.
Yeah.
So it's about the buildings, but the buildings in place. And so having the least amount of open space in Victoria, and having been through COVID 5 years ago, which was the start of my first term as a councillor, we knew that we needed to take a longer term view. We know that the density is increasing. Bentley, East Bentley, right across our municipality, lots and lots of medium density being built and high density. And if people are taking larger old blocks with a single dwelling and turning them to dual occupancy or townhouses, people are losing that private open space. So that public open space
becomes the backyard.
Becomes people's backyard. It becomes where people get out, kids get out, people socialise, kick a footy, sit in the shade of a tree. And so as our municipality is changing, it might feel like we're losing 3 houses, but in actual fact, if you look at the data, the number of dwellings in Glen Eira has not gone backwards, it just keeps on growing.
You're expected to have 65,000 new dwellings by 2051, which is really hard to imagine.
It's double what we have now.
Oh, we've just had a question come in from Donna from Elstonwick, but she's just followed up. Thank you, you already answered the question. I might just read out your question anyway, Donna. Thank you so much. Hi, Mayor Simone. Given Glen Eira has the lowest amount of open space per person out of the municipality in Victoria, and only about 4.4% of land as public open space, what specific measurable targets and timelines is Council committing to in this term to increase green space per resident? And how will you report progress publicly?
The great question, an area I'm really passionate about. So Council, when I became a councillor, luckily for us, there was almost like an old phone book, a document called the Open Space Strategy, and it was a refresh based on previous work. So we've actually identified where all the gap areas are, and I think realistically we're not going to be able to use the measure of the area of open space per person, but we can use the other measure that's used internationally, is what proportion of people live within a certain distance, whether it's 400 metres or 500 metres of open space.
So what's the target in Glen Eira?
So, well, Glen Eira is the lowest. We're competing a little bit with City of Stonington or City of Stonington. And what I'd like us to see is to move down from the very low percentages to something where we start to head towards 50%, 60, 70%. Even the City of Melbourne, which has a lot of open space, doesn't have 100% of people living within 400 metres, or at least the last time I looked at the state data. And so what we're doing in that way, based on the open space strategy, is saying here are the gap areas, and if we can fill those gap areas, then more people will be living within 400 metres of open space. And not all of them will be very, very big parks. Some of them might be pocket parks, some of them might be 2 or 3 blocks. And since I've been a councillor, there were 19 high priority gap areas, and we've filled 6 of them. So I think that's a really tangible way of measuring progress in a way that's realistic, because if our population is going to be going up so significantly, and Glen Eira's only 39 square kilometres, we just would not be able to keep up with the metrics of square kilometres per person.
One of my favourite parks in Glen Eira is Boren Reserve.
And it's an amazing story. It was an expensive park, so, state government water infrastructure that in clearing it had some constraints on what could be built there in terms of safety. But it has its very clear identity. It's different from any other park we have, and we like parks to have different identities. It's like an activity park.
And it's suitable for older children and teens as well, which is not something we see often in landscape architecture.
It carries a really, really wide age range, and it has some accessible features as well. So, going up to the sandpit and, seeing someone push a wheelchair and young person being able to play with the sand and with water without having to be crawling around in it. So there was a lot of thought into the design. And then the implementation of it. It's
who were the landscape architects on the project?
I would have to come back to you on that. I can send that by email. The designs would be, I'm sure, available online.
We'll share that with our listeners on the follow-up post. We'll be sure to share some pictures of that project.
But having taken my children and my nephews there of different ages, different times, it's just amazing to watch, as you say, the hive of activity where you can take a couple of different young people or older people and they just divert off to the areas that capture their interest. So it really does capture and meet a wide age range. And it also has an amazing water feature, outdoor water feature. Obviously really costly for council. None of those things come cheap, but it's free. If on a hot day, anyone from our community and visitors to our community can just go and run through the little bits of water spouting up in the air.
And it's amazing how kids aren't cold. It can be early spring. We're all still wearing jackets, but I've always seen toddlers just steaming ahead through that park. I want to ask, what's your favourite building or place in Glen Eira?
It's I find it really hard to limit it to one. When I was a young person, I loved super modern things. As I've grown older, I've come to probably appreciate some of the heritage as well. So I'm going to give you three.
I'll allow it.
Thank you. Get permission first. I still love Ripon Lea.
Ripon Lea Estate.
Having visited there with my grandparents for such a long time and heard different family stories, and the gardens are stunning. The building is obviously comes from another era. And it reminds me of how people had to adapt coming to a country that was so different from particularly Europeans.
And a tip for the listeners, you can go to the trust markets, and gold coin donation entry is a great way to get into Ripon Lea Chief and see the gardens and the grounds.
Absolutely. And I know the National Trust of Victoria would welcome new members. Also, if people are Glen Eira residents, as long as they can show their residency, we have an arrangement with the National Trust that Glen Eira residents can access Ripon Lea for no cost. So that's a way of us adding some more open space for community members. So that's one. If I take more modern, there are a few streets in, I would say, Caulfield North that have very modern houses from like the modernist period through to probably the 1990s that are really stunningly timeless in their modernity. And I do love walking down those streets. I'm perhaps waiting for some invitations to go inside some of them. I'd love to see what they look like inside.
And by some highly significant interwar period and modernist immigrant architects.
Absolutely. And I think, so Glen Eira's put a heritage protection on some of them. Some of them have individual protection. Some of them, there are some precincts. And many people are actually really glad to have that heritage protection because they love their home and they want it to stay there for future generations. So I know over time across Melbourne, many heritage homes have been lost, or homes that could have had heritage on them. So it's nice to know that we've protected a few in Glen Eira to kind of capture that story of how our areas have evolved.
And what's the third favourite?
And the third favourite is probably my home. So we're getting into probably old. I just live in a Californian bungalow, and I always thought I would live in a very modern home, but I love the windows. I love the wide window sills. I love the LED lighting. The fact that it lets in so much light and connects so beautifully with the outside. The prisms in the windows, so that when the sun comes through, I'm living in a rainbow is
I love
magical.
that. I love that. We've had a question to come in a little bit earlier, just when you started telling us about your favourite building or place, and Sam from Caulfield has been waiting very patiently for me to read it out. Thank you for your question, Sam. Hi, Mayor Simone. How is Glen Eira addressing youth engagement and opportunities, including sport for local schools and recreational programs?
Wow, that is a really, really big question. And I want to actually let you know, Sam, so I've been, over the last year, I've done school visits and we've got some young people asking and wanting to know how we're delivering on that as well. Glen Eira has over, I think, 50 sports clubs and a number of sporting ovals and facilities. And it's a challenge because, as I said, we're only 39 square kilometres. We've already got the least amount of open space and we have an increasing interest in sport. And we've got more girls and women playing sport, which is fabulous. So we have a program of upgrading the pavilions with support from state or federal government to make sure that there are proper changing facilities. So gone are the days I used to take my daughter to soccer and they'd get changed in the back seat of the car and you'd be holding up things on the window so people couldn't see in. We're really trying to make sure that it's not something that turns girls and women away from playing sport. But the challenge is, of course, maintaining the facilities so that they can be used with a growing population and growing number of people. So it is an ongoing effort in terms of making sure that we have those sporting facilities. In terms of youth engagement, there's a number of different ways, and I'm not sure what Sam's specifically aiming at. Certainly, we have staff that connect with schools. I've probably done about 20 school visits over the last year. I haven't posted photos of all of them. I only do that when we've been given permission by the school and the parents. But we actually also have programs. So we have a youth leadership team, a youth advisory committee, and there are things that the youth in our community do. So we have the annual youth art exhibition, which is young people from age 5 to 25. And that exhibition is not organised by adults. It's organised by the youth themselves. And that is the latter part of each year. Looking in our calendar, I really encourage people to go and see. The artwork is phenomenal. And there are a number of other, as well as sort of broad activities. We have youth awards each year. Young Citizen of the Year each year, and they are, you just see the applications that people have sent in and what our young people are doing, the businesses, the not-for-profits, the caring for other people. Our young people are so inspiring. And there's also programs and that we have, and that's really more in the operations of the organisation, that are supporting perhaps some of our more vulnerable young people to help connect them with different activities that council runs or different services.
In discussing schools and open space and recreation, there's definitely a missed opportunity out there, I think, across all municipalities in using schools, particularly public schools, land and sites as more community recreation facilities. Certainly so many schools lock their gate, shut it off, big sign, no trespassers, and over the weekend the basketball courts are closed, the ovals are closed.
So it's when we had the conversation and the ongoing conversation about open space, it does keep on coming up. How do we actually unlock some of those other, and it's not just open space, but it's buildings. So I know that my daughter, for instance, played basketball games at the McKinnon's, secondary college.
Yeah.
There's the Bentley Secondary College. They make their facilities available for different community activities. But we probably need more of that as our population grows. And so there's a particularly nice model, Malvern Primary School, so the other side of Dandenong Road, where during the day, their ovals and their tennis courts are used by the school, but outside that, I think they might be managed by the council. And there's certainly, you see young people and older people running around and using them all the time. So, but you've got land owned by different people, and so that requires conversations.
And bridging that bureaucracy and bridging those challenges, but such an opportunity in terms of land use.
And I grew up over the back fence of McKinnon High, so we all used to just meet all the kids in the neighbourhood and play cricket.
Exactly.
It was McKinnon High back then. Now it's McKinnon Secondary College. And so, as you say, Ilana, sometimes young people will just break in or use it if it's not locked away. But we also need people to treat spaces respectfully. Otherwise, schools will lock up spaces. So we have a number of private schools which perhaps down the track, if those negotiations can be put in place about how things get funded, to open up more spaces for the community.
We do know that by using spaces and having them be active and in the care of custodians, be it community or operated out of hours by, say, council, it's a way of actually caring, preventing graffiti because the space is actively used. It's not just locked off and quiet and someone can sneak in. A way to continue that care and maintenance. I want to continue our conversation actually about recreation because the Carnegie Memorial Pool was finished earlier this year, and for me is probably one of the most memorable from my childhood. Growing up in Glen Eira is one of the most memorable facilities, going down to that pool. Also, we keep talking about McKinnon Secondary College. Indeed, that was my high school, and we had a swimming carnival there. And that was a massive project, $75 million by Co-op Studio, who I believe also did the Bentley Library.
Yes, I think so. So the process of designing that pool was really about listening to the community, and the designers, the architects, I think did an extraordinary job. I grew up going to Carnegie Swimming Pool as well. My kids did their swimming sports there for school, and what they did with the community engagement was say, well, what's important about the pool? What do you love about the pool? So people, the feedback, the general trends, because obviously, as I said earlier when I was talking about street lighting, you can sometimes get completely diametrically opposed opinions, was people loved the feel. I mean, now we would call it retro. At the time, it was leading edge, wasn't it, in the 1950s? That brick feel, that kind of low-scale feel. Yeah. They loved when you went through the outdoor pool. They loved the hill, where I remember lying on that hill, and they loved the diving pool.
Yes.
And so all of those sorts of features were preserved in, but also modernised. So there are indoor pools now. There's sort of a wellness area. We've put in accessibility. There's changing places bathroom, thanks to the Victorian state government funding for that. The hot water pool down the back has a ramp going in, so there's deals with accessibility. There's also, as well as a sort of a more traditional spa that you sort of have to clamber into, there's also a spa that people in a wheelchair can be wheeled into. So no one's missing out. The hill was kept. In fact, the hill is almost completely original, so it wasn't scraped away and then replaced. The style using that sort of brickwork. But then the modern features are it's all electric, it's got solar panels, it's been built into berms if we're going to, so it's very efficient in terms of its design. So it's, I think, one of the few pools in Australia that's 6-star Green Star rating.
Wow, which is really hard when you've got to heat all that water.
Yes. And so much thought went into how the pool would run, but also how it would be built along the way, to make sure that all of that circular economy, all of that sustainability was taken into account. And that's how we got the certification, is having the supervision every step of the process. And I think for me, more than anything else, is when I walk in there, I feel like I'm home. It doesn't feel like I'm visiting something different, but it's like a more updated and beautiful home. And I particularly love the community's reaction to it, is that just anywhere I go, people comment positively. I have people from other municipalities actually coming and visiting it, and then if I happen to be there, them stopping me and telling me how much they love coming to Glen Eira's pool. So I think it sits very well with GSAC, which is very much a sports and aquatic centre, whereas the focus at Carnegie is really about the pool, but it has the group fitness room, it has the reformer beds room, so it meets and complements different market, but really lovely natural finishings as well.
Such an important part also of the Australian cultural identity, that these outdoor leisure centres, these outdoor swimming pools, often memorial swimming pools, often indeed these modernist mid-century projects built in the 50s and the 60s. So much so that I remember back in 2016, Australia's pavilion at the Venice Biennale was called The Pool, and it was a small ankle-deep pool, and it was showing these exemplar famous swimming pools from around the country.
And I know this comes back to what's a real big challenge for councils across the board. It's not just Glen Eira. We talk a lot about financial sustainability. Where the level of government closest to the community, we only have, in terms of the overall tax take in the country, about 4%. So we do rely also on grants from other levels of government and fees and charges. But we look after and deliver sort of 25 to 33% of services and infrastructure. So it's a real challenge, and I know it's particularly in more regional areas, it can be a struggle to keep that pool open. But we know when we provide places, people come together for that shared interest, whether it's sport, whether it's music, and we know that social connection is incredibly important for a community. It's important for people individually, for their health and well-being. It helps people feel well in their place. It helps them connect with other people. It helps them build a routine into their life. And so it's really important that councils provide those places, but it's a challenge to do it.
I couldn't agree more, and this actually topic is at the forefront of my mind right now because I'm researching finding a new gym. And I've come to truly appreciate how important a leisure centre is, and these sort of facilities that are provided by council, where the price point for the service you get and the quality you get and the cleaned amenity on a regular schedule, and they have to clean it because it is a council facility, is so much more affordable and sits at a better price point, better quality than a generic gym. And I had a thought to myself just this week, how awful would it be if these facilities didn't exist and weren't provided by council, and your only option for a gym membership or a pool visit was somewhere fully privatised?
So that comes down to the core of what's council about and what's government at any level about. And the idea is that there are some things that an individual wouldn't do and that perhaps a business wouldn't do, but there's a shared benefit for the community. So libraries is another example, community pools is another example. And so they're the sorts of things that government does. It fills those gaps because there is a public value to them. And sometimes that changes over time because perhaps another level of government might take it, or a private industry might take over something, or community groups might be strong. And that's so constantly thinking in local government, what's our role, and if we no longer need to provide something because there's ample provision in other areas, then let's focus our activities on where the gaps are that our community needs. And absolutely, I think that what we have at Caulfield Recreation Centre in terms of gym, what we have at GSAC, which is a full-on gym in terms of all the ranges of equipment and the different things, they're meeting the needs of different parts of our community. And so it's a very different experience to go to Caulfield Recreation Centre, to go to Carnegie Swim Centre, or to go to GSAC if you're looking for that type of exercise.
And you're providing a really low-cost, super fun activity for just families to bring their kids, come down to somewhere like the Carnegie Pool and have a beautiful experience. I want to see the data on the benefit return to society by giving the community these amazing, low-cost activities that they can do. Imagine the kind of boredom and later trouble that it keeps people out of. We've had another text come in. Phone line is running very busy tonight. Here we are. Hi, Mayor Simone. How does the council plan to address rising costs and maintain low residential rates while investing in critical community priorities like green space, transport and social programs? No name there, anonymous texter. Thank you.
It's a challenge.
No one likes paying rates.
So the challenge for us is the costs are going up. That's something we don't have control of. They're going up at a faster rate than a faster incline rate than our rates are and our other. And so you have to make choices, and they're not easy choices. As when I first became a councillor, one of the other councillors said to me, "There's a reason they're called difficult choices, and that's because they're difficult to make." But you're constantly looking at what can we do. And this is what businesses do. This is what people do in their own home. What do we do about our revenue? What do we do about our costs? And making sure that if we're going to put it in business terms, we need to make sure we're not trading insolvent. So we need to make sure that we always have enough cash to cover our obligations, our liabilities. And that will probably mean going forward there might be some decisions that are going to be uncomfortable for some councils or some community members. We're constantly looking at every service that you provide. Do you continue providing it? Do you continue providing it at the same level? And that doesn't mean that things are going to stop, but it means that if we're going to be responsible councillors, we're constantly looking at that and evaluating it. Likewise, do we maintain or replace assets at the same rate, or can we slow things down? Could we delay, upgrading a pavilion or converting some land that we've bought into a park so that we make sure that we've actually got the money to do that? So there are all of the timing decisions. Council has over 120 services. We've got a few $1 billion worth of assets and a tiny little pool of $200 million a year to try and do all of that and look after our community. So every year when we do the budget, there is a vigorous debate. It goes out to the community to say, have we got this right? We get feedback, we might adjust things. And it's not easy. And I know that councillors and community members will go in and argue for certain things, and sometimes I agree.
Well, that's the joys of the democracy, isn't it?
Sometimes I don't.
And the joys of the democratic and political process there. I want to know, what's the hardest leadership decision you've ever had to make?
I think the hardest decisions are ones where you stop doing something that you've done so the community's got used to it. So if I think about one that impacted me really emotionally at the end of the last term was when council decided to no longer directly provide childcare services. So we still have the facilities, but we no longer hired the staff. And if we come back to that early conversation I had, when I became a parent, there weren't enough childcare spots. I was like, am I even going to be able to go back to work? My parents were working, so I didn't have that sort of backup. And it's very different now in that there are a lot of for-profit but also not-for-profit childcare providers, early learning centres, and there were, at the point in time we made that decision there, I think there were 7 or 9 applications where people were planning to build new centres. So there actually geographically weren't the gaps that there were, and there were enough places for all of the expectations in terms of the current children between 0 and 5 and projections. But I did view that what the council's provision service was sort of different in terms of what it was qualitatively. And I know that people were really passionate, community members were really passionate about what Glen Eira was providing. So there was, the decisions are all on record, but I could feel what the community members were communicating to us. And the decision at the end of the day, by the majority of council members, it wasn't a unanimous decision, was to no longer provide that directly. It was really, really hard. And I didn't have any children in childcare at that point. My youngest was mid-teens. But I could remember what it was like. I could remember when you hand your child over to an early learning educator, this is my loved child, and that trust that you have in the people that are looking after them and in the council that's providing that service. So stopping doing something is really, really difficult.
That's true. What in your research, touching back onto your PhD about leadership, was the most surprising thing you discovered? And the number one lesson you want to pass on to us and the listeners too, as part of that?
So my thesis, my research was about looking at a system and understanding, in my case I was looking at talent development of young people and looking at the education system, so both in school and out of school. And there are amazing things being done in Australia. But it really brought home for me a sense of we pride ourselves of being sort of egalitarian and working towards equality. But it's not necessarily there. So much of it is the luck of who your family is or what school you happen to go to or which teacher you happen to get. And I think we could probably apply those same principles to how you design a place. So if we look at Glen Eira now, there are quite significant differences based on which council it was part of. Street Trees, for instance, 25 years ago before Glen Eira was formed. And so for me, I think the biggest learning that I had out of that is we've actually know a lot of what needs to be done, but how do we actually make it happen?
And how do you cut that red tape? How do you get it done?
Look,
Everyone gets to a point that you just want actionable progress.
yes, and so that's something I keep on always ask myself. And we've got one councillor, Councillor Parasol, who absolutely says, "But what have we done? Let's look at what we've had all these conversations, but it's not about talk. What have we delivered?" And so it's really good to have that diversity of councillors with people focusing on different things and reminding us where we've gone. So for me, I wanted us to be really systematic, which is why I was really pleased about strategic property review and community needs. The community infrastructure plan, to make sure that we were putting in place what we needed over the longer term and making sure that we have the funding in place. And I think that being really systematic about that is going to make sure that everything that needs to be done will be done. And then it just becomes the juggling of, okay, can we do it in the year that we wanted, or because what's happening with rates and costs and is happening, or do we slow it down, or can we speed something up? So we are coming up to a state election next year, and we would welcome our local MPs to engage with us and find out what projects we'd really love some funding.
What are your priorities from the state government?
So we've articulated that. It's all public now. And as I said, we've bought blocks of land to create parks. We'd love some funding towards that. We've got some buildings that we think support in those areas would be really helpful. So a big thank you to the funding that we got at the federal election to deliver things. As I said, there's a pavilion in Bentley, East Bentley, where it's going to be upgraded. So there's going to be women's changing room for our one of the softball clubs, which is great, and multiple clubs that use that. But we've also got in our advocacy a range of, not necessarily involved with cost, but policies that we think need to be either introduced or amended to deliver better outcomes for the community. And those are around family violence, they're around community safety, and a whole range of things like that. So when we go to the government, different levels of government, we're not always going with a hand out. We're actually going sometimes with his solutions. Listen, this is what we've heard from our community.
Another question has come in. Tony from McKinnon, thank you so much for your question. Does the council have a plan to tackle loneliness and social isolation, especially for elderly residents in an increasingly urban and busy environment?
So that's a conversation I've been having with our staff for the last 5 years, and it's definitely on the radar. We prefer to take what we call a strengths-based approach. So rather than saying loneliness, we'll say let's do social connection, let's do social cohesion. So there are a number of different, and what we want to do is enable community to reach out. So there are different groups that are running. So we've got University of the Third Age, we've got different senior citizens centres, and a lot of them get support, whether it's spaces or whether it's funding to operate, to make their lives easier. There's also direct things that we run. So Local Connect is a program that if people are really lonely, they can connect up and they'll be connected with someone who then helps them identify what they're interested in, how they might connect. So that's sort of a bit more of outreach and connect in. So one is here's some things trying to attract people, and the other is let us help you. So council has supported that. And there was 3 weeks ago now, we had our first Healthy Ageing Expo. And the feedback I had from all the exhibitors was it was amazing because it was all about what's happening in our community so that people who are in those older age groups could just walk around and speak to people. So they've already got some familiar faces, pick up some brochures, get information to have a really great life living in Glen Eira. There's so much happening.
Is this only for residents, or is it for anyone who lives, works and plays in Glen Eira?
So we talk about it as being for community members, so that I've extended it so it's live, work, play, rest, shop, learn. I include learn because obviously we have schools in Glen Eira, and we also have Monash University Caulfield campus, Glen Eira, and we have the University of Third Age. So I don't think you ever stop learning through your life.
Huge community groups. Where can listeners look up all these opportunities and programs that are available to them? What's the link to search?
So, depending on what people's preference is, we obviously each month have the Glen Eira News that gets issued, and there's a community announcements section in there, which different organisations can let people know what's happening. There's also information on our website. It's a great resource. So if you're interested in bowling clubs, or if you're interested in tennis, or if you're interested in, as I said, University of Third Age, there'll be ways to access that information through our website, because part of what we want to do to support and activate community is to help people connect within community to the different community groups or to each other.
And you have to take that first step as well, listeners. The community doesn't just magically happen around you. Don't click your heels. And as hard as we try also to build a building for the community, sometimes you have to actually turn up. You have to put yourself out there. You have to be involved in programs and events and use the facilities that are offered and create that connection.
And if I reflect back to when I first became the councillor, it was 2020, end of 2020, COVID. So many wonderful things happen in our community. So I absolutely agree. Don't wait for someone to come to you. But there were so many people reaching out. Neighbours reaching out to neighbours. Do you need me to go shopping for you so you don't have to go out and get exposed to the virus? We had all these different soup kitchens popping up there, and that's why I come back to my research about system, so that people don't fall through gaps. And it's something that I think is evolving. We have to be realistic about what council can and can't do, because if we want council to do everything, then we need more money to do it. But by supporting and helping community groups and individuals become really active, we're hopefully encouraging groups to actually also reach out to people.
And getting the watershed of the system right, or getting the infrastructure of the system right, allows everything else to flourish. Good buildings, good architecture allows those community groups to function and operate and meet and get together.
Yeah.
But I want to ask you both, as the mayor, as a councillor, and as an individual who lives and is involved with Glen Eira, what does good design mean to you?
So for us, I think it's evolved. And I think if we look at buildings that were built 20, 30 years ago, and perhaps even more recently, they were very much single purpose. Now, and I don't think we didn't ever know that, but we've recognised we've got this finite amount of space. We've got a growing population. We're thinking about the utilisation rates of our spaces. So how do we design things so that they can be multi-purpose, so they can be modular, so that they can be used in different ways, so that more people can have access to them? And that requires architects and designers who think about how different usages might be able to be contained in a space. Does that mean we need to have storage so that different groups can come and not have to take everything away and bring it back? Does that mean that there might need to be sort of some acoustic treatments depending on the usages? And so that's a big part now of us doing the analysis on the strategic property review, is looking at our spaces that may not be used as effectively and frequently as they could be, and thinking, how do we make sure that we're getting the best value for the community out of each of those things? And so some of it might be designing new things, but some of it's looking, well, what do we have and how can we tweak what we have to make sure that it's really delivering for the community?
It's definitely been an amazing pivot in civic and local government architecture in, say, the last decade, the last even 15 years, from single purpose, this was a library, this is a change room building, to what we know as community hubs or community learning hubs, even, where we have a sporting pavilion, we have a library, we have multi-purpose spaces, sometimes maternal and child health is in there, and you're really getting as many uses in a building as possible. And again, so that's used and open and available across that 24-hour cycle and across that 24/7, 7 days, right? Not to waste the asset.
And we've seen that. So the library I grew up at, the Bentley Library, is now the Bentley Library and Community Hub, and after school and before exams, absolutely filled with young people. So the spaces that are really attractive to the young people have been designed in a way that they want to be there, and it's working. We've got the Murrumbina Library and Community Hub, so it got all those different spaces. We've got Morley Village, which was an old single level school that is a fantastic place for a whole range of different community groups. And so when it comes to people, there's community shared, which has a men's shared group, women's groups. There's a number of different senior citizens groups, Italian, Greek. I think there's Chinese there. There's different arts groups, ceramic co-op. But people are all coming to the same place, which means there's the chances to interact.
And meet and discover more of your community, but part of that mixed use, and I'm mindful of the time and I really want to squeeze in a question because there's some really massive developments happening, and some proposed, some have not happened yet for sure, including in and around your Elstonwick. But East Village, 3,000 new dwellings, mixed use. That's a big project. What's the procurement model? Where's the funding coming from for that one as well? How many private partners are invested?
So this is actually a bit of a story about you can set all of the guidelines you want in terms of urban planning, and it's kind of the reverse of build it and they will come. And I've asked for a report which will be coming back by the end of the year to understand the pipeline of permits that have been issued versus what's been built. So, for instance, East Village, maybe one day is going to be an amazing area of mixed-use dwellings. But it has, other than the school, so the second campus for McKinnon Secondary College, as far as I'm aware, nothing's being built. And that is a trend that we're seeing, which is why I've asked for the report, so that we don't throw around, vague claims, but we've actually got some data behind it. A significant proportion of the permits that have been issued since I've been a councillor have actually not been developed.
Yeah.
So we're, hearing that it's not economic or it's people having difficulty with funds or
there's the awful trend of I'll just get a permit and sell it and take the value add of having a permit in order to do the flip. And it's a developer mindset that's unfortunately not contributing enough to the public realm and the urban realm.
Yeah. So when we did some structure planning probably about 3 years ago now, and there were these ideas in our housing strategy about how we were going to encourage people to build, rather than the big dual occupancies where they were houses that were both, side by sides, that were both bigger than the previous house that was there, and the block being split in two, how do we encourage that gap area for Glen Eira of 3 or 4 townhouses is a bit smaller on a block, and all the urban planners tell us we can put the settings there to encourage it, but ultimately, and this comes back to it's the developers, the builders who are going to decide what to build, and so if they're private developers, they'll do what they do when it makes sense, and if it's a state government or federal government building something or a housing organisation building something, they will build what they build. So we can only put the planning indications in place, but we don't actually control what people are going to say that makes sense financially and actually do.
Does incentivising developers actually have a return benefit to council?
So look, it's interesting. We operate in a rate capped environment. I think if you're going to go for the financial aspect, so that's set by the state government, and that limits or caps how much. So we can't, if inflation is really high one year, we can't increase our rates to make sure that we've still got the same spending power. Any household trying to run that way would understand exactly how challenging that can be. But when new dwellings come online, so through the subdivision, then there is a small uplift in rates. But when you consider the proportion of new dwellings historically over the last 5 or 10 years compared to the base, it hasn't been, massively significant. If that 65,000 dwellings that you're talking about,
2050, it's a long way away, Teals.
That will obviously have a huge impact on the number of dwellings in Glen Eira.
But we have to have the appetite for having more medium density and more of that missing middle, as it's called, and not be afraid of seeing some of that development go up, especially around train stations and busy urban centres. I know it's really contentious, particularly in your ward right now and in Elstonwick.
I think there's been, and Elstonwick has been, had some really interesting examples where we contrast it. It's about how the developers interact with the community. And there was one, I won't start naming names, but there was one particular development that community members fed back to me in Elstonwick, where the developers invited the community, locals, to give them feedback. And everything that I've heard since from community members was they were really pleased with the way the developer engaged. The developer listened, incorporated including some heritage elements, some open space. They've left some deep soil so that they can actually grow trees as opposed to it being completely car park underneath. Well, certainly at that design stage. So it can be done collaboratively to create a good outcome. And I remember seeing the design think, oh, gosh, that looks amazing. I could really see why people would want to live there versus the other extreme of none of you are important and we're just going to steamroller ahead. And when there's the none of you are important steamroller ahead, that's probably when it doesn't benefit actually from the local knowledge that locals have, and it also creates the most angst.
And you miss out on some of those really, really amazing, interesting design outcomes that come from caring, come from collaborating. And at the end of the day, I think the really good developers, they want to leave a legacy. And sometimes developer can be a dirty word, especially for some designers to react to, but there is opportunity, there is possibility. I'm so mindful of the time. I have to ask my last question. We've covered so many topics tonight, and that is, what gives you hope?
I'd start with the fact I'm an optimistic person. So I always assume the positive for as long as I can. I'll always work to that. And when I interact with our community, we've got just amazing people. And whether it's, older people who are sharing their wisdom, when it's having conversations with our young people, and they're not just sitting there complaining, they're out there actively doing things, starting things, trying things. And that to me gives me hope, because if people were just all sitting there depressed, complaining, we wouldn't have anything to look towards as being, better. And nothing's perfect because the world's constantly changing. So that really says we all need to be aware that there will be change coming to us, and we also need to change.
Yeah. Hear. Here's to good changes. Thank you so much for joining me on the program, Mayor Simone Zmood.
Absolutely, my pleasure, and any time. Thank you, Ilana.
Thanks for joining me for another evening of Radio Architecture with Ilana Razbash. This live show was broadcast and recorded in the Radio Karim studio on Bunurong country. You can replay the show wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for tuning in and supporting community radio. Take care.
Oi, 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 oi.
IGA, it's shopping nights. IGA, where the price is right. Seaford North IGA, for your groceries and liquor. IGA Express, there's nothing quicker.